2:19 a.m., Persian Gulf, 18 nautical miles off the Iranian coastline. Iranian radar just locked onto a U.S. Navy destroyer. Sweep. Not a routine scan. A sustained fire control lock. The kind that precedes a missile launch. Within 12 minutes, American strike aircraft were already moving toward the Iranian coast. Welcome to Navy Strikeforce. Today we're breaking down the 94 minutes that followed that radar lock. 94 minutes in which a single electronic signal pushed the Persian Gulf from routine patrol to the edge of a direct military confrontation. This is what fire control radar illumination actually means, and why the response it triggered was exactly what it was designed to be. The Persian Gulf, on any given day, is one of the most electronically contested environments on the planet. Iranian coastal radar stations sweep the water continuously. U.S. Navy surface combatants operate their own active arrays. Multiple nations maintain surveillance assets. Electronic emissions are so dense that distinguishing a targeting lock from a routine tracking sweep requires trained operators who know the precise difference between a system looking at you and a system preparing to shoot at you. The difference is technical. In real time, it is also potentially lethal. The USS Forrest Sherman, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer on routine patrol, had been operating in the northern Gulf for 11 hours when the contact was logged. The ship's AN/SLQ 32 electronic warfare system detected a sustained emission consistent with the fire control radar of an Iranian HQ-2 surface-to-air missile battery positioned on the coast north of Bandar-e Lenge. The HQ-2 is a Chinese-built derivative of the Soviet SA-2 system. Range, approximately 45 kilometers. Effective engagement ceiling, 27,000 meters. Against a surface target at short range, the system requires fire control radar to maintain a continuous lock until missile impact. The emission the Forrest Sherman's EW suite was detecting was precisely that, a continuous lock. The ship was 18 nautical miles from the battery, inside engagement range. The watch officer had the contact at 2:19 local time. Sustained fire control emission. No prior warning on the Iranian military activity net. No NOTAM restricting operations in the area. No communication through the maritime hotline that exists precisely for moments like this. Just a radar beam, locked on, holding. He had 40 seconds to make a classification call before the data had to go up the chain. This is where the human factor enters. According to personnel familiar with the incident, the HQ-2 battery in question had conducted what appeared to be a maintenance calibration sweep 3 nights earlier. A brief emission that was logged, classified as non-threatening, and filed. When the operator at 2:19 saw the new emission, he had a fraction of a second of hesitation. Was this another calibration? Was the prior filing going to make this one look like routine activity? He called it up immediately. By the time the contact reached the Forrest Sherman's commanding officer, 4 minutes through the ship's internal chain, the emission had been sustained for over 300 seconds. 5 continuous minutes of fire control lock on a U.S. Navy warship. That is not a calibration. The commanding officer transmitted a flash report to 5th Fleet at 0224 local time. The report included 3 data points: emission type, duration, and geometry. Those 3 data points together constituted what naval doctrine classifies as a credible hostile act. Not yet a use of force, but a demonstrated capability and apparent intent to engage. The response options available to 5th Fleet in that moment were narrow. Continuing on course meant accepting the fire control lock, while signaling that the U.S. Navy would not respond to electronic targeting alone. Maneuvering out of range meant ceding ground and potentially inviting Iran to establish a new precedent. That sustained radar locks could push U.S. warships out of international waters. Requesting air support meant escalating the visible U.S. presence in a way that Iran would certainly detect, interpret, and potentially match. 5th Fleet chose escalation. At 2:31 local time, 12 minutes after the initial lock was detected, the USS Harry S. Truman's Combat Direction Center received a tasking order. 2 aircraft, immediate launch. Target area, northern Persian Gulf coastline. The aircraft assigned were F/A-18F Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 213, each carrying an AN/ASQ-228 ATFLIR targeting pod, 4 AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, and 2 GM-88H ARM anti-radiation missiles. The harm is the detail that matters most. The AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missile is specifically designed to home on radar emissions. Lock on a radar, launch a harm, and the missile follows the beam directly to its source. Any Iranian radar operator running a fire control lock who sees 2 Super Hornets on approach, carrying harms, understands exactly what that pairing represents. It is a message delivered at Mach 2. The 2 aircraft, call signs Hammer 1 and Hammer 2, were airborne at 02:37 local time. Transit time to the Northern Gulf approach corridor, approximately 22 minutes at combat speed. The Forrest Sherman was still under fire control lock. Now, consider the decision the Iranian battery commander was facing at that moment. He had been running a fire control lock on a US destroyer for approximately 23 minutes. The lock was generating data, range, bearing, speed, maneuver characteristics of the target. This data has real intelligence value independent of whether a missile is ever launched. But 2 American aircraft were now inbound on a vector that his own radar operators were tracking. 3 options were in front of him. Option A, maintain the lock, continue collecting data, accept that the approaching aircraft may engage his battery if he holds the emission. Option B, shut down the radar, break the lock, lose the data, eliminate the harm threat. Option C, launch. Fire the missile while the lock was maintained, and the geometry was still favorable. What would you order? Comment A, B, or C below. Because the Iranian battery commander was about to decide. At 2:53 local time, 34 minutes after the initial lock, the HQ-2 fire control emission ceased. The radar went dark. Hammer 1 and Hammer 2 continued their approach. They reached the coastal approach corridor at 02:59 and conducted a full transit of the contact area at low altitude, visible to Iranian shore-based observers, clearly detectable on Iranian air defense radar. No weapons were employed. No targeting solutions were generated against Iranian assets. The pass lasted 7 minutes. At 3:06, both aircraft turned south and began the transit back to the Truman. The Forrest Sherman had maintained course and speed throughout the entire incident. The ship's defensive systems had been in full active mode. Countermeasures were preloaded. The crew had been at general quarters since 02:26. By 3:31 local time, 72 minutes after the initial radar lock, the Forrest Sherman had cleared the immediate engagement zone, and the crew stood down from general quarters. The confrontation was over, but the post-incident analysis generated a document that circulated through multiple commands in the weeks that followed. A document that identified not just what happened, but what the Iranian battery's extended lock had accomplished, regardless of whether a missile was ever fired. The lock had lasted 34 minutes. During those 34 minutes, the HQ-2 battery's fire control radar had generated a continuous track on a US Navy destroyer conducting active patrol operations. Speed, heading, ECM profile, countermeasure response timing, all of it collected, all of it recorded. The intelligence value of a 34-minute fire control lock on an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in active patrol configuration is significant. Not because it tells Iranian planners how to hit the ship with an HQ-2. The HQ-2 is a dated system unlikely to penetrate Aegis-equipped defenses, but because the lock forced the ship into a specific sequence of defensive reactions. And those reactions, the exact timing of countermeasure deployment, the EW emission response, the formation change, the air support request timeline, are themselves intelligence. Iran now had a 34-minute behavioral profile of how the Forrest Sherman responds to fire control lock. The Iranian battery never launched, but it didn't need to. In the weeks following the incident, 5th Fleet reviewed standing procedures for responding to sustained fire control illumination. The review identified that current procedures created a predictable response sequence. predictable enough that an adversary could use repeated provocations to build a comprehensive behavioral library of U.S. defensive reactions. The procedures were modified, but the 34-minute behavioral profile from the Forrest Sherman incident already existed. It was already in Iranian files. Sometimes the most dangerous provocation is the one that costs the aggressor nothing and teaches them everything. Stay sharp, stay informed. This is Navy Strike Force. We'll see you in the next one.